and this diversified oil on the diversified supply in Europe. I wanted to close with some cultural advice, since it meant precisely for you, Google guys who go, you guys are going all over the world and making deals and having Google. Do you have Google Kazakhstan yet? If you do, what do you do if your host hands you over dinner a sheep's eye or a sheep's ear? Wrap it in a noodle. You've looked at the book. John Brown, the former head of BP, was handed a sheep's eye over dinner. Al Gore, when he landed in the region, was alerted that over dinner he was going to be handed a sheep's ear, and he was given the following advice that you must remember: swallow, don't chew. Thank you very much. I see.
Thanks for your talk. It's very interesting. So all the pictures you drew showed pipelines facing west, and yet there's this big blob there called China to the east. And we've seen the last few years China's become very aggressive in securing energy supplies. And I'm wondering if there's any activity on that front. Are the Chinese involved in this region, and possibility of building pipelines, I guess, across the Himalayas or the steppe? What's the story with China?
That's a good question. China is active, and there are plans on the table. China has built an oil pipeline into Kazakhstan, and it's proposed a $26 billion, I'll go back, $26 billion pipeline, gas pipeline from Turkmenistan into China. China is, in effect, an ally of the West, of the United States in this respect. There's no difference if China builds a line. There's this prevailing wisdom, or at least that I read a lot, that China is our enemy on the energy front. It's not, at least in this region. If China, I don't believe China will, because $26 billion is a lot of money for a pipeline. But if they did, it would coincide with the best interests of that region. It would help make them politically independent.
Great. I have a somewhat different question, and that is, you showed the northern pipeline. Last couple of years, there's been this standoff between Russia and Ukraine and Belarus about the pipelines that flow across through Central Europe. And I'm wondering if the same argument doesn't hold in reverse. Why doesn't Ukraine have this power over Russia, or Belarus have the power over Russia, because they could shut down the pipelines at any time?
Well, that's what that is what those standoffs are all about. Well, it depends who you believe, but the Russians claim, and I believe it's true, that the Ukrainians are stealing oil from the lines going through there, and the Belarusians too. The way they see their advantage is on the economic side, but they don't have, in the same way that none of these states has geopolitical aspirations. This aspiration that Russia does of projecting power, squeezing in that manner, the Slavic states don't either. Or have not demonstrated one. Ukraine and Belarus. What they try to do is squeeze for dollars. And so, for example, the latest one you heard was it was a month or two ago, and Russia, a day after the Ukrainian election, or the day of the Ukrainian election, suddenly announced Ukraine owes us $1.3 billion, and we're going to shut down the pipeline Monday unless you pay us this. And I tracked that down. And what happened was a Ukrainian mafia figure named Dmitry Firtash had been stealing natural gas in this there's a Russian mafia deal, Russian-Ukrainian mafia deal, and he stole $1.3 billion worth of natural gas from this mafia deal and took off to London. And this went all the way to the top in the Kremlin. We want our money. And so they announced it as though it was the Ukrainian government that did this. But in fact, it was, you know, mafia to mafia. And I blogged about this, by the way, on my blog.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you for coming to talk to us today. It's very interesting. I was looking at this picture and during your whole talk thinking about why don't they just cross over the Caspian like this proposed pipeline here, especially if Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan don't want to be under the thumb of Russia. It seems like a no-brainer. So why on earth is this still in proposal phase? Why would the Prime Minister of Turkmenistan say, no, I want $500 million. I'd rather go through Russia and be under their thumb. Why isn't this done already?
Let's conference call these guys. I feel exactly the same way. But I can tell you a couple of facts. One is the reason the Baku-Ceyhan pipeline happened was not because the U.S. got behind it. It was because it was conceived by the presidents at that time of Azerbaijan and Georgia, Haydar Aliyev and Edward Shevardnadze. They decided they were going to have, both of them, remember, coming from the Kremlin, decided we're going to take on Russia. We know they were brilliant guys who, with real nerve, who knew what the Kremlin was going to do before it did it, and they decided they were going to take the risk. The guys on the east side of the Caspian don't seem to have that same nerve. And they'll argue it, you know, square. They'll argue it round. Why, you know, why they don't do it. But in the end, because of the logic that you just raised, it's obvious they just don't have the guts. Yeah.
I was wondering about sort of, we've talked about the north to south and the east of there. How does running the pipeline through Turkey change its geopolitical role in the world or its ability to influence what's happening there, since its relationship with its surroundings are changing and evolving both due to internal and external influences?
Yeah, it is the hub. Turkey, Turkey, these are almost all Turkic countries. It's, Georgia, Armenia, and Tajikistan are not, but the rest of the 5 are. So they're kin, and Turkey regards itself as the father, the patron of the whole region, and it is the hub. It's kind of a patron-client relationship, and the U.S. has kind of used Turkey. I don't mean used in a bad way, but you know, as a surrogate in the region. It's a very positive role, and Turkey is serving as that way station, that channel for the energy coming out of there and going on into Europe.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you comment on the current situation in Georgia, where the Western government now facing the mass demonstrations, they shut down TVs, mass media, and stuff like that? So, can you comment on that? What do you think is going to happen?
What do I think is going to happen?
Yes. What do you think is going to happen, and how it may affect the pipelines?
I don't think it'll affect the pipeline. Just to say first, everybody knows that Georgia is nothing without that pipeline. Its whole future, its anchor as a real country in the world relies on its strategic relationship with the United States, which is linked to the existence of that pipeline. But I don't know what's going to happen. Who was behind these demonstrations? Boris Berezovsky's former business partner